Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Kubra, for that introduction. Uh, I'm still getting over the shock of learning that you were born in '93. But anyway, to get started with what we are talking about today, the reason for the discussion today is that in the last 100 years, especially, many of the top companies have been technology and engineering based. And especially in the last decade, with the startup culture picking up globally, one sees it's a very positive thing, but then one sees that there is a big gap in the deep tech companies that are run by women. Of course, there isn't too much there aren't too many statistics available on this, but it seems to be that the number of companies is less than 10% instead of what it should be, which should be 50%. Okay, so and now this gap becomes even larger when you're talking about traditional engineering streams. So, but on the other hand, the number of students who are in these traditional engineering streams who are women are quite a bit. I mean, it's a lot more than 10% and closer to the 50%. Of course, we have an international panel today, so it varies from country to country, but so I'm trying to keep it general. So the question is, what is holding women back when it comes to starting companies in subjects that they have domain expertise in? I mean, if you've studied, some engineering, why aren't you starting a company in that? Or is it the domain expertise itself which is lacking? And more importantly, what can we do to bring the number of women-led tech companies up to 50%? So that's the reason for the discussion today. And I'm going to be asking each of the speakers to sort of give us their views. And I'd like to start with Professor Swati because she runs, her company, her group of institutions has been around for about 40 years, though she hasn't herself, but it's been around for 40 years. And in addition to a lot of undergraduate colleges, they also run several schools. So, starting from, the school thing. So I would, if Professor Karad, if you could give us your views on this subject.
Yeah. Thank you, Tilottama. Please excuse me for my voice because it's little, cold and cough, so it may sound a little odd. But good afternoon to all those in India, and good morning to all of, Soma and Judith. And first of all, I'm really glad and I'm thankful to the organizers for inviting me here today to speak on this very topic and share my views and thoughts. I feel being in the leading position, it always gives me a feeling that there is a responsibility that how do I really contribute in making this world more conducive for more women to come up, to explore, to work and get what they deserve as men do, right? So I think such platforms wherein we can exchange our ideas and thoughts really contributes in that process. That's what I feel. So really, I'm really thankful to you all. I think first of all, as Tilottama had said that, why the numbers, I think we will not get into the statistics, but let us think in this manner that because I come from the educational sector, and what I see is we all know that the inclusion of women or girls in education itself has started very late, since ages women were deprived of education and coming into the mainstream, let us say any other sector. So they're confined to certain roles and responsibilities. So the gap that we see in every sector between men and women is very wide because of that basic reason that women have came into the education system very late. So since last, I think 2-3 decades, we could see that there is, slowly but steadily, the number is growing in the education, that girl child coming into school, coming into higher education. When we talk about India, I think the percentage is now, it's really, when we say, we should say it's very positive development that we, at least we have, more than 27% approximately women or girls getting into higher education. And when we talk about this STEM education, I think the percentage is quite good. recently, whatever the statistics are being reflected are kind of 43-44% in STEM education. So the number is growing steadily, but as I said, the gap between the two genders, when we look at different professions, that gap, to narrow down that gap, it is going to take a little time, because we have women have entered into education space very late, and that is the foundation of any career that you talk about, any professional thing that we do. So education is the basis of that, right? So the entrant, as we have entered late. So what I feel is, instead of talking why there are less women in any of the sector, let us say how we can improve this and how we can speed up this process, or how we can narrow down this gap between the two genders in every sector. So for that, I believe there are different aspects to it when we talk about education, definitely. But when we say that somebody, why he or she is not into that, or let us say there are percentage of women into higher education, in STEM education, but when you look at the percentage of women into jobs, that is still very less. Number of women in businesses, that is still very less. So it goes down to the, the orientation of every individual. How are we orienting our girls? How are we orienting our boys, and how the families are getting oriented, and how the society is being oriented? It's not about the competency. That's what I believe. It's about the orientation that is happening. So it boils down to every aspect of a girl's life, how they are being nurtured, how they are being oriented. Basically, if we look from the psychological aspect, or naturally, women are, we are more of a motherly kind of a nature, and because of age long, the societal, the cultural impact on the girl, the mind of the women, I think somewhere we lack in aggression. That had happened because of, since long time we are being told that you should do this and that. Okay, so genetically it has gone down in us that, okay, we should not be very aggressive, which is very much needed when you are into business, when you are into any sector. So then the overall, the confidence level, we always underestimate ourselves. This has happened because of a very, very long time, how the society, how the families have treated the women and the girl. So to bring women and the girls out of it, I think we need a lot of orientation that needs to be done from the school level itself. If you ask me how the education sector can really contribute in this, and probably everybody is doing that now. But what I feel is, it's about, men are inherently aggressive. And that is, I feel, when we talk about a startup, you have to convince the people, you have to speak your ideas very clearly, very confidently, very aggressively. And so we can do that from the school level itself. Because as I said, there are different parameters, different aspects, or different people who are contributing in the overall development of the girl child. So from school education itself, we can start that. And probably, I think that is the way education institutions can really develop that acumen, because we need to get the exposure to how do you, do the fundraising, the financial aspects, the other, there are many things that we need to learn. And in that, the educational institutions can play a major role. That's what I believe. So I think, Tilottama, that's what is my primary, thought about this very, inclusion and influence. So when you say inclusion, education sector has a major role to play in terms of inclusion. And in terms of influence, I think we need more and more role models. And we need more women in the as the decision makers in the VC funds, in the investment agencies, so that so we need that. That's what I believe. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. So before I move on to the next speaker, so, based on what you said, this is a extension of the same question, but So basically, when the conversation is about women entrepreneurs, one often talks about double standards and being judged harshly by people who are feeling threatened often. So, of course, as as for business, this is a terrible thing to happen. If somebody around you, your client, for example, is feeling threatened for just because of your gender. So on the other hand, it is also possible that because growing up we have often encountered people who respond negatively or judge us harshly. It's also possible that in the process these are triggers for us. So it kind of prevents us from correctly identifying and encouraging allies and mentors. So people who are actually trying to be nice and who are interested in helping us, we tend to ignore. So now the question is, since you were talking about, teaching at the education level, what can we do to change this situation? Can we work towards this at the school, college level? And how can institutions, companies identify and encourage teachers, bosses, mentors with the right mentality? I mean, is it possible to kind of, if you find that somebody is a good mentor, is there some way one, as in at an institution level or at a company level, that we can actually boost them irrespective of their gender? What do you think of this?
Yeah. I think Tilottama, it again goes down to what I said. It's about the mindset, the overall mindset that the entire society has. If you look at not only India, everywhere in the world, the mindset has to change, and to change that it takes time, but definitely we can work upon that from starting with the school education. What I believe is nowadays what we do is we can have different kind of projects wherein all the girls and boys are been taking participation, but at the same time, because it's not only about a boy or a girl how they are getting groomed, it's about their families. Because going ahead, we see that the lack of support of the family also is one of the contributing factor in not having many women in all these sectors, right? So at the school level itself, we have different projects wherein we can enhance this required aggression in the girl child, and make them aware of different things and help them understand all these aspects. And we involve the parents also in that, the families in those processes, in those projects, so that the families who are having the girl children, they are aware what are the qualities of their girl child and how competent or what she can do. And they, over a period of time, they forget about that gender, right? It's only about your competency, it's about your commitment. So I think as I said, the orientation of the family, the boys and the girls, if that starts happening from the school level, and it's very much possible with all the activities that we do, with all the projects that we have. And of course, I feel for the girls to come out of this very impact that had happened over a period of time, over so many since last many ages, we are going through this. So for that, I think we must have the social and psychological the subjects, the studies, people who can handle and really help them psychologically make understand. That psychological thing, if we have that kind of a subject included at every step in the education, the societal, the overall impact, and through that we can really groom the girl child's the mental approach can be changed. And going ahead in higher education, of course, if we start it at the school level and going ahead in the higher education, we do have, again, we can have these kind of projects wherein the boys also understand that when they enter into the professional world, it's not about the gender, it's about the intellect, the competency, and also because what we see is, my understanding and my analysis about, when you, let us say there is a girl who has an idea and she goes to a VC, or the investor, and many a times unconsciously also men judge the girl because they have this in their mind, okay, if she goes family away, what will happen to the company? If her family doesn't support, what will happen to her? Or will people accept a lady as a boss? That is also there, right? So they have lots of questions. Unconsciously, they are biased towards the women. So I think that unconscious bias, if we have to remove, education industry, education institutions have to play a major role by having different projects in the institution, giving the exposure, making the girl students and the boys understand it has nothing to do with the gender. And slowly when this gap will narrow down, because as I said, it's a very wide gap because we have entered very lately in this, process. So it will slowly narrow down, and I hope that it will really make a difference when we get equal opportunities and with a very positive mindset from every factor of the society.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks. Thank you. Dr. Elsner, I would like to ask you to give us your thoughts on this topic. But just before that, a little bit of a background for everybody else. Dr. Elsner is the managing director, as Kubra said, of Karlsruhe Institute of Technology's international department. Karlsruhe Institute of Technology is one of Germany's top schools. I think they're usually in the top 3 in terms of technology. And Dr. Elsner heads everything from an undergraduate program. There are about 5-6 schools which are under her. There is the undergraduate program in mechanical engineering. And what is more relevant, I think, for today's discussion, there is Karlsruhe's Technology Business School, which really aims at further education, like master's level programs for people from the industry who would, then come back and want to do a little more training in engineering and business. So based on that, Dr. Elsner, of course, has a very close connection with German industries, and Karlsruhe itself is like startup hub of Germany. I mean, there are a lot of startups. So, based on that, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Doctor.
Thank you, Tilo. Thank you for having me here. It's really important to me to speak to you in this regard, because as you said, Tilo, my profession deals with people from industry mainly. But before I come to this point a little later, if you allow, so I would like to give a general introduction, maybe from the point of view of myself and my role also as a woman in this field, but also maybe from a more European perspective, or not only European, sometimes perspective as well, because I'm quite convinced that we have great cultural differences in this topic still. But we could learn from countries who are ahead of us. And I'm not talking about Germany, because we are not ahead, not especially, but there are other countries which are ahead of us. And for sure, in my view, there's not one strategy to get more women or equal numbers of women into leadership position of tech firms. But there are several strategies, and Swati, I'm with you, and really you couldn't say it's more often that it's about competences. But before it comes to competencies, it's about self-confidence for the women, first of all, and for sure about respect in society for women and what they are doing. And I think that's, from my point of view, one of the crucial factors why we are in this situation, because there was not very much respect for everything women did in the past. If we talk about family things, as well as in the business, for sure. And we are working since, to be honest, 100 years on this topic. And before, we have a history of about, 2,000 years of society. So it's really a short period of time where we were able to get our position. But I think we didn't do. We did well. Sorry, it's very early in my place, so I'm losing the words. So, and it will be kind of I think we should have a strategy on this. So especially people coming from engineering backgrounds, they are highly analytical, and so are women as well. often they want to be perfect in the very first step already, even when they are very young. But it's not about being perfect. It's about being able to learn and to adapt. And women are highly able to adapt to situations, as we know. But on the other side, as you described already, there's a bundle of structures which are established, and those structures don't allow to get us in. But I think it's too short to think only about the problem. So I would like to take the other way around and to think about our strengths. And our strength is, as I said, to adapt to situations and to be highly analytical as well. And so just step back and look at the situation from this point of view. So if we have strength and if we have already a network outside, so we have to take each and every opportunity which is there. And this is something we have to teach to people. We have to teach to women, especially. In my business environment, there are a lot of international women, fantastic women. And I love to see how they took the first step in order to, yes, take the chance to go abroad and take the experience from abroad as well, because it's the mind are opened up by this way. And then to support those women for sure. This is important as well, to have structures, maybe established structures, but also to take the opportunities at each and every moment. And this is something I want to teach to people as well. I want to show to people that this is one approach we have to use. And then for sure, there's education, there are trainings, there are structures in industries, and there's a lot of change currently ongoing. And I think there has never been this chance as it is right in the moment, even though we have this pandemic, but we have those formats online now, which weren't available 2 years ago. So I think there's a great opportunity arising actually. So we have to take our chance and go for this way. And for sure, for every mankind, I would say it's important to have a vision. And so really to think about the personal vision of what I want to be in my life or in my business is one of the first steps everyone has to do. And man and woman at the same time. And if we do this in a consequent way, I'm really, I'm persuaded we will come along with much more women in leading positions, because up to my mind, at least some of the companies and some of the countries are ready to do so. They're waiting, they're looking for all the time. But women themselves, they have to overcome also this obstacle of about being too, I don't know if I'm perfect enough right now. So I just want to ask young and older women already to take the chance and to go out and to see there are so many opportunities. And then for sure, we are talking about mentor systems. We are talking about role models. And yes, I'm happy to be part of this world right now, because I think that the situation was never so good as it is actually. So that's my statement for the beginning.
Thank you, Doctor. So before I move on to Dr. Patel, one question that I would like to ask you. Now, tech entrepreneurs are often people who come from a non-business background, which means that many important parts of business culture, practices, etc., do not come naturally to them, as opposed to somebody who comes from a business family, for example. Now, this becomes even more complicated when there is a shortage of mentors, as you also said that one needs mentors, and women in general lack mentors when compared to men, and also they're afraid to ask for help. Again, like you said, because one wants to be projected as perfect, and one is worried that when one asks for help, it makes one look weak. So, what should one do to overcome this? This problem of not coming from a business background, but requiring that business background to become a successful entrepreneur. And again, so there's what's, I'm guessing based on your experience that there's something you would recommend to aspiring entrepreneurs, and there's something that you would recommend to established entrepreneurs. So what would you say they should do?
Thank you for this question. As I said, women like to have to claim to want to do things right, and they can do that, but only if they had a chance to learn it. So role models and mentors are on the one side important, but we also have, as you said, other opportunities. As I said, the strengths which are missing from my point in the discussions are very often women in technical contexts are often very analytical, very intelligent, and also able to perceive and understand things on an abstract level. From my point of view, the key of success there is always to look for the opportunities to learn and to listen. This does not have to be in a mentoring program in the very first step for the incoming woman, because there are too few of it. It can also be at congresses or talks, as we can now easily access them, as I said, via internet. There are a lot of opportunities to learn from other people in special topics. And there's an enormous breadth of offerings, actually. So it helps to proceed analytically and to consider in which key topics is it important for me to learn from others. So coming from an engineering background, for sure, management accounting, financial accounting, but also leadership competencies are crucial for women in tech environments. But this list can go on and on. I think it helps to have a kind of a landscape for oneself to see where are the main topics I want to go for it, maybe for the next 6 to 12 months. And then really to go step by step. And for sure, if you have the opportunity to join a whole program where you have all those aspects included, that's great. But if you haven't a possibility to do so, you can look for those topics individually. And then for sure, to make up your mind. And I think this is underestimated, esteemed all the time, because if you make up your mind, being intelligent, you are able to do the next step and to ask the questions which are necessary. And then go further and go further. Don't expect to know it all by now, by the very first slot. No, you have to, it's a step forward process. So, and then for sure it helps to have this vision in mind, why I'm doing this, because I want to get this knowledge in those fields and go further. And then you will meet inspiring people. And those inspiring people are giving, again, the energy to go further. And I think that's a little bit maybe the clue of it. And don't expect to have it all in the beginning. It's getting, but be self-confident.
Thank you, Dr. Elsner. So I come to Dr. Patel Raman, and before I start, I really need to thank her because it's the middle of the night, absolutely for her. So, but she very kindly agreed to be a part of this discussion. So I'm also switching gears a little bit here because both Professor Karad and Dr. Elsner come from, a little bit of much more of an educational background, and Dr. Patel Raman comes from. So of course she has 3 degrees in engineering, but then she also has worked with the FDA, which is the governmental agency with all the regulations and so on that they look at. Plus, for the more than 6 years, she's been the head of this very interesting company that makes heart pumps, which is something that requires, I think, basically I would say this is absolutely cutting edge of technology, because it absolutely cannot afford to fail because it's doing the job of the heart. So based on this, as we had said in the past, earlier about being self-confident, being brave, etc. I know you're coming from all of that, but could you give us a little bit of, what you think of it, both from, as head of a deep tech company, as well as somebody who's been to the, through the government stuff and the funding agencies? I mean, yeah, Dr. Patel.
Thank you. And I do have to say thank you to Kubra. I have never been introduced with a song, so I was very pleased to be introduced with a song. I hope to have that happen again. So, you know, you can take, if you really think about the statistics, and I'm certain everyone is well aware of them. I had not visited the statistics in a very long time. And when I look at India statistics, and I'm based in the United States, and I look at the US statistics, 7% of Asian women are in the STEM field. That's a pretty small percentage. Then when you add in the percent of women who are in senior leadership positions like all of us, it's another 3 to 4% of that number in India and in the US. So you're really talking about 0.25% of our leadership in STEM fields are women of Asian descent. And that's a fascinating statistic when you think about how many of us have achieved that level of success in that space. And so when I was invited to speak here, I was thinking about, how did I get here? How did I manage to get into this 0.25% group? And so there are a couple of lessons that I thought I would share. I was hoping to be able to share my screen, but that's okay. There are a couple of lessons that have been really invaluable to me. And I love that Dr. Karad and Dr. Elsner have been talking about how we continue to learn. It doesn't just stop when you finish your undergrad or any of your education. I have been learning these lessons over and over again. And the two top lessons that I have learned is, number one, to always sit at the table. And what that means, and this is a lesson that I can't take, I can't own. I learned it from Sheryl Sandberg. Many of you may know her as the COO of Facebook, or Meta, now Meta. She wrote a book. She dedicates at least a chapter, if not more, to sitting at the table. And I will ask all of you to think about how many times you've walked into a meeting, or think about this as you progress in your entrepreneurial journey. Walked into a meeting, looked at the very big table sitting in the middle of the room and thought, I'm just going to sit over to the side. I've done that countless times. I've done it countless times. I don't know why. I have no idea why I have done it. And when I realized in my head that I could flip the switch and say, I deserve a seat at the table at my level, I deserve a seat at the table, it also changes the narrative in my head of how I conduct myself in that meeting. And so I think it's really important that what might seem like such a little thing is actually quite powerful for yourself as an individual, for your own mentality, to take a seat at the table and participate in that conversation. You don't have to take the seat that's on the side. Number two, and I also find it funny to be saying this because I think many of us are guilty, is this behavior that we have learned as young women, as girls, to apologize. Why do we apologize all the time? If you Google this, and I on my slides, I actually found multiple titles of articles which talk about women apologizing and saying, stop apologizing. There's some great skits or videos online if you find them. Why do we apologize? I'm sorry for being late to the meeting. I'm sorry I have to leave early. I'm sorry I ran into you. Change the narrative to use language that doesn't apologize, but simply acknowledges that you're late. Thank you for your flexibility. I appreciate you waiting for me. Excuse me. So this is a lesson that I constantly am teaching the women in my own company, as well as young women in school. Stop apologizing. So I think those are two very tactical, direct, actionable items that we as young leaders, as women, as educators can teach young women to implement in their lives, in their jobs. And that's actually across not just the workplace, but even personally, right? So that addresses, and I love the topic of this conversation because it addresses the inclusion. How can I be included? I can be included by sitting at the table, and I can be included by not apologizing anymore for things that are out of my control. So then when you think about moving from inclusion to influence, how can I now influence? And as a woman in a leadership position, there are three areas that I focus on: hiring, mentoring, and networking. And I think, Thilu, you probably are going to get into this with some of the questions, those three areas in terms of hiring, networking, and mentoring are areas in which I feel we have a responsibility. I have a responsibility as a leader in my field to go out and ask questions about how my peers, my male peers, how are you hiring, how are you mentoring, and how are you networking? And I am constantly amazed that these biases that exist, Swathi, you were talking about this, the biases that exist that many are unaware of are included or incorporated into the hiring process. A mentor may mentor the same type of person. We all look for the groups that are like our own. So often in my space, white men will seek out white men. You know, even at school, at the school level, kids are forming their groups based on similarities with the people that are around them. And so encouraging diversity, having open communication, telling my peers, my male peers, look for women, hire women of diverse backgrounds. So that has been a wonderful way to open the conversation. And then I'll save a little bit because Bill, I know you want to ask some questions, but I also have some very specific ideas about networking as well. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Okay, so I will ask you. Yeah, so the question I wanted to ask you was, and you know, a very, very small percentage, like you said, 3% or 7% of something else, a very small percentage of women-run tech companies get funding and or government support. Now, how much of this is because women don't want to ask for help? And this is a form of help when you're asking for funding or support. And how much of this is because they ask for funding but don't get it, which is the assumption that, you know, we would make, that people ask but don't get it. And how much is because they undersell themselves, get into a bad deal, and then don't know how to get out of it. You know, based on your experience, both, because you've seen it from both sides of the thing. Next, and of course, you know, since we're all engineers, how can we change this, and what needs to be done, and by whom?
So I personally don't feel like the issue is not asking for help. I haven't found that to be the case with my peers. I have reviewed applications for grants and for funding. And so there are definitely plenty of women who are applying. I do think it comes back to networking. And it's really interesting if you think about, in general, how others, how men have advanced in society. And I think this also was a conversation in the earlier session. It very much is networking. You know, here in the US, there are jokes about how the deals happen on the golf course. You know, what are the types of events where people are able to connect with each other? And so, for example, with government funding, if you know the reviewer or the grant officer on the other side, often that relationship can be invaluable in helping you improve your application, or in one day helping you get winning that application. So the aspect of relationship building that I think we are missing is networking, because what I have experienced is the networking opportunities are not necessarily geared to a woman like myself who has a family, who can't go to happy hour from 4 to 7 at night because I have other responsibilities. So I think shifting how we all think about how we collaborate, where we meet, is a step in the right direction. So for my team and my company, I don't do happy hours. I can't do them. I don't want to expect other women with families to do them. I like to do a breakfast, or I'll do a lunch in the middle of the day where my team doesn't have to worry about childcare at the end of the day and leave the children at home. So that's one place to start.
Okay, so and what about the other part? Do you think we as women tend to, you did say that we do undersell ourselves in the sense of, you know, you don't sit at the table, but does this also happen when, say, one is asking for funding as an entrepreneur? I mean, do I ask for too little, or do I agree to giving up too much of a share of my company in exchange for too little money, or do I just not ask for a big enough salary? and then how does one fix this?
Right. So yes, and I think that probably is all tied to confidence, right? Which is a nice connection to Swati's initial comments about how do we instill this level of confidence in our girls from the beginning. And so I have taken classes and courses on negotiation and how do I negotiate anything? How do I negotiate my salary? How do I conduct myself in front of an audience where I need something and I don't want to come across as aggressive or bossy, but I also need to come across as confident, right? So I think these are skills that we have to be able to not only teach within the education system, but there has to be access to that as someone like myself evolves from, being in graduate school to then getting a job in the workplace.
Thanks. So, Dr. Elsner, I mean, just based off what Dr. Patel was saying about having slightly of the importance of networking, which you also talked about, and so did Professor Karad, but but then also having slightly since we're talking about non-traditional ideas, is it possible to also maybe come up with like non-traditional networks or a slightly different way in which women can kind of work together? Because like you said, women engineers, we tend to be very analytical. So one of the things that we analyze and say is that if you were in a gender segregated group of, only women engineers, that's any pool. And you don't necessarily want to be stuck there, because for your business, you need access to as big a market as possible. So what would you recommend to existing entrepreneurs or existing engineers who want to become entrepreneurs? I know it's a bit of a sudden question, but
yeah, it's a little bit to get it all. So no, I think it's doing the one and doing the other as well. So we are having training groups only consisting of women, especially for the younger ones, to be honest, because as you said, you need the networking aspects, and you have to include the men as well, for sure. And we are all living in one society, so it makes no sense to be separated. But to get self-confident, to train maybe in a safe environment, once negotiation training things, for instance, this could help women, especially in the beginning, to overcome their limits and to see, oh yes, I might do it. So I would recommend to do those trainings at the same time as you offering trainings for both genders, and to bring them together. And I totally agree to Sonna with this coming out that we have to meet ourselves, but not especially between 4 and 7 in the afternoon, because as we all know, we have other duties as well. So but it's really difficult to overcome it. But I think it's not the solution, as I said, for one strategy. You have to be flexible, and women are able to be flexible and able to adapt, as I said. And so just be confident that we could do it, but we have to take the opportunities for this. Yes.
Thank you. I think we are getting close to our time limit, so I'll just have one final question to Professor Karad. So you had spoken about, doing this at the school level, where you're helping bring in, self-confidence and aggressive. Well, not aggressive in a negative way, but aggressive. So assertive behavior into young girls. But the problem is that it has to be taught, and the people who are teaching it are coming from the same system. So how do you deal with this? I mean, because a teacher can't teach what they themselves don't know or don't believe in.
Yeah, I think you have hit the nail. So Yeah, it's a challenge, of course, because the teachers, they themselves have come from this old school of thought, and they have never got that exposure. So, but still, we can't just say that, okay, if the teachers do not come from that kind of a mindset, it can't be done. But I feel it's how do we develop the entire ecosystem in the school or in the college? It depends on that, and probably because with the exposure and with a lot of things that they come across, while if we have these kind of projects which will be taken care by the existing teachers, who definitely everyone do not have that kind of exposure and ideas, but over a period of time, probably those same teachers will also encourage, and they will also get groomed in this process. That's what I always believe, because there is not a very typical or a particular solution to this problem, that how do you make the teachers who do not come from the same thought process teach the children to be like that, right? So I think a lot of grooming is required, and we do that with our teacher training programs. And now the young teachers who are there, who definitely look forward to these kind of projects wherein the girl children, and we do a lot of things in that context. So I feel that a lot of training is required for the teacher, but in the process, they also are very much keen to impart these kind of things amongst the girl children. I believe that, we need to make sure that the girls start thinking independently. We need to groom that quality in them. As everybody said just now, like I feel everybody had gone through the same process. And what Sonna said, that, okay, when you enter the boardroom and you try to sit somewhere else where you are expected to sit. So I think this had happened because of the age-long, the societal impact, the family impact on our minds. So definitely teachers have to be groomed, and in the process, they will definitely try to enhance these qualities in the girl children, as well as I said, we need orientation for the boys as well, right? And somewhere I feel that if we can just make sure that the girls also understand that they should be themselves. They need not imitate boys, or women need not imitate men. They should be themselves. And I think that will really enhance the confidence of all the women, and it will make sure that when the entire society or the countries give the equal opportunity and have a very same lookout towards men and women, probably that time we'll come to know like how much competency we have and what women can really do. So I believe we have a task to do, definitely, with our teachers, but of course, with all the exposure, we'll be able to do that.
Thank you, Professor. So I think that's all we have time for. But just to summarize, of course, what everyone keeps saying, network, get mentors, most importantly, build your self-confidence. Like Dr. Elsner said, go step by step. Don't try to be the best instantly. And yeah, all the best to everyone here. Thank you so much for being a part of this, to the panelists, and thank you so much to the audience for listening to us. Over to you, Kubra.
Thank you, Tilottama. Thank you, Kubra.